Hello everyone and welcome to the Prado Museum in Madrid, Spain. We're continuing our Wednesday morning series of short conversations in English, thanks to the help of the American Friends of the Prado Museum. The American Friends is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to help support the museum and share this collection in as many ways as we can. And today we'll be looking at a very special painting for the Prado because it is the only painting in the collection by Rembrandt. Let's have a look at the wall label. First here we can see when it was painted and the title. Now Rembrandt was the great Netherlandish master of the 17th century, as Rubens is his Flemish counterpart. And this painting here is part of a series of heroines that he painted from antiquity and the Old Testament in between about 1633 and 1635. And if we come in close, we can see his signature and the date. So what was painted? What is the story here? What are we looking at? Well, we can see that we have this woman who's sitting at a table, and she's lavishly dressed in luxurious clothes, and she has these beautiful long sleeves. Look at these sleeves and the gold detail on her sleeves. And she's wearing an ermine stole, a fur stole. You can see all of her jewels. She's wearing this beautiful chain. Look at this chain that's embellished with rubies and with sapphires. And so all of this tells us something about her social status, right? This tells us that this is a wealthy, important woman, a palatial woman maybe. And if we come back, we can see that in front of her, there is a servant who's offering her a cup, right? And the servant, we can tell by her hairstyle, by the clothes that she's wearing, and by the cup that she's holding, that she also kind of belongs to this court setting, to a palatial, wealthy setting. And this cup is extravagant. This is a really expensive cup. We might not even know that today, and this reminds us of the importance of thinking about material culture when we're trying to understand paintings. But this is a nautilus, and to have this kind of decorative cup made of an exotic shell, which would have been a really important collector's item, this is something that not just everybody could have in their homes. This is something that they would have in a court setting. So again, another marker of elite social status. And then in the back of the painting, we have a third figure. We have another servant. But she looks a little bit different, right? She doesn't maybe look like she belongs to this wealthy, palatial setting. She looks like maybe a more humble, more domestic servant. And we can barely see her. It's a little bit dark, but if we look close, we can see that she's holding a cloth. It looks like she's got a cloth in her hands. But she's really barely visible. It's like she's hidden. And we don't really know why. Teresa Posada, who's the curator, a curator of this collection, has said that it might be that there was a restoration that went bad. We're not really sure, but it's more likely that at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, this is part of a trend of art restoration that tried to make this painting more Spanish, more typical Spanish style, or what they thought was a more typical Spanish style of the 17th century, by making the background very dark and dramatic and the front really bathed in light. And so this could be part of that style of art restoration that we saw both inside and outside of Spain. But it happens to be that we have a photograph of this painting from the end of the 19th century, before that restoration took place. And we can see that originally that there was more content here. The back wasn't quite so dark. We could see this woman a lot more clearly. And we could see actually that what she's holding in her hands, and we can see it really if we look close as well, what she's holding in her hands is not a cloth, but a sack. And we'll keep this in mind because this is really important to understand the real story that we're looking at. And she's also behind a curtain that we can't see anymore today. We can see it in the X-ray images that you can find on our website, but she's standing behind a curtain, and there are actually two curtains that were originally painted here and here that make us think that this main woman is inside of a tent. And there was more light around this figure here, making us think that there was light coming in from outside of the tent, so like she was coming in. Now, for a long time, this painting was interpreted as the scene of Artemis about to drink her husband's ashes. Queen Artemis was a Carian queen from the 3rd century BC, and she was married to King Mausolus. When Mausolus died in battle, she was absolutely heartbroken, and she decided to build a mausoleum for him, the mausoleum of Holofernes, which is, by the way, how we get the word mausoleum from Mausolus. But on top of that, on top of building the mausoleum, she wanted to be the living mausoleum for her husband, the living sepulchre of her husband. And this is the scene that we thought had been painted here. Artemis about to drink the ashes of her husband mixed with wine. But there's part of the iconography of that story that doesn't really fit here. Artemis was a queen, and this woman, while she's wearing like very wealthy clothing and she looks like she's from an upper class, she's not a queen. Artemis was depicted as a crying widow, and this woman doesn't seem like she's sad, she's not mourning, there's no evidence to show that she's a widow at all. And also the servant in the back. The servant in the back does not fit in that scene. She doesn't fit with the kind of rich palatial figures that we normally see in the scenes of Artemis drinking her husband's ashes. And so all of this brings us to the idea that what Rembrandt was really painting was the biblical story of Judith. Judith was a Jewish widow, and she went to Holofernes' campsite. Holofernes was an Assyrian general, and she got dressed up, and he invited her to dinner, and she went to dinner, and she took her servant with her, and this is the servant that she took with her. Now, because they were Jewish, they had to bring their own food, and so this would be a sack that they brought to bring their food to dinner. But as we know, this is not just a sack of food, this is the sack where later they would hide Holofernes' decapitated head after Judith gave him too much to drink and killed him, so saving her people from the attack from his army. Now, what's normally represented in this scene, the most common way to represent this would be the moment of decapitation or right after. And we have a painting right here by another artist that is the same subject, where we can see Judith with Holofernes' head. But Rembrandt always wanted to be original. He was also very young when he painted this, and so it could be that he kind of wanted to prove himself in some way. Not just that he was technically great, but that he also was innovative in his way of depicting a subject. And so he brought a new way of depicting one story that had been painted so many times, and he presented it in his own way, in this moment before the scene of the murder. And so why did he choose this scene? Actually, at the time it was painted, it wasn't the most common of subjects, but when Netherlands separated from Flanders and proclaimed itself an independent nation from the Spanish crown, well, they felt kind of identified with the feats of the Jewish people in the Old Testament, and they felt that they were the new chosen people. They had this idea that the grace of God had helped liberate them from an imposed ruler. And in this sense, Judith was a heroine. And this kind of makes us think of the history of collections too, because it's not really a coincidence that this is, the one Rembrandt that we have in the Prado. It's always interesting to think when we're in a museum about all of the paintings that we see, but also to keep in mind what we don't see. If we think of the history of the Spanish Empire and its relationship with the region of what is today Belgium and the Netherlands, it's easy to understand why the Prado has such a special collection of Flemish painting, where we have the largest collection of Rubens in the world, but not nearly as much representation of the 17th century Netherlandish painting after their independence from the Spanish crown. And with that, I hope that you've enjoyed having a closer look at the Rembrandt that we have here in the Prado and thinking about the history of collections and how they come together. You can find out more about this painting, more about Rembrandt, also see the 19th century photograph and the x-ray on our website, and find out more about the American Friends of the Prado Museum and our sister organization, the Fundación de Amigos. Thank you for joining, and we'll see you again next Wednesday for more conversations in English.